recording this now. So again, this lecture is about going abroad, going global, and why do we need to go international, and what are the strategies involved in that. So the question to why go international, and there are many, many factors why companies would do this. And probably the biggest issue would be the opportunities of basically, especially if you have a product that has a marketing advantage. So what we mean by a marketing advantage is perhaps your brand reputation or your brand image is very strong in that market already, and therefore, why not? I mean, why not launch there and you get an automatic advantage? You could also have excess capacity. So you've got a big factory, you're making a lot of products, and your domestic market is already saturated, which means you've basically exhausted your growth, or maybe the growth is still there, but it is growing more slowly now, and you can see opportunity abroad. Then why not, in fact, market yourself abroad? There's also this concept of economies of scale. And I think I've mentioned this many times to you before, that as you increase your production, the more units that you're producing, that basically drives down the cost of your product, which makes you more attractive in your domestic market, but also internationally. And you can imagine when Apple first launched its product, the iPhone, they probably didn't have as much economies of scale. They were, starting out only in the US, and their profits were only so much. But now they're one of the most profitable companies in the world, and by value, they're the most valuable company, partly because of that huge economies of scale that they've been able to achieve with their iPhone. Almost every country would have access to an iPhone. Every citizen can buy an iPhone and use it wherever they are. A unique product means that you are differentiated, and once you have that differentiation, and especially if you have a patent, and therefore you're protected legally, especially if you're patenting this across the world, not just in one country, then it's a huge advantage for you to use. Remembering that in most countries, patents expire. Okay, what that means is if you have a patent, I'm not sure exactly how many years, like 15 years after you've been granted a patent, then after 15 years, anybody else can copy your product. And therefore, you sort of want to maximize that 15-year advantage that you have. There are other factors such as a saturated domestic market, competitive pressures. Maybe the competition is very, very strong already in the country where you're from. And therefore, you're trying to explore markets where your competition hasn't been there yet. And the number of players in that market are very few. So again, an example of this would be the electric car market. Obviously, the United States is more, I wouldn't call it saturated, but obviously there are more people with electric vehicles in the United States than, say, there are in another developed nation, maybe Australia, especially Australia, actually. Australia does not have that many electric vehicles. Can somebody tell me why, by the way? Have you done some research on why is Australia, per capita, I'm not talking about the fact that it's very small. Australia only has 20 plus million people. The United States has 350 million people. Why is it that per capita you have less electric vehicles in Australia than the United States? Can anybody tell me that?
Maybe because our per capita GDP.
No, per capita GDP of Australia is healthy. It's pretty good. Not quite as high as the United States, but you would think it would be able to sell a lot of electric vehicles in Australia. Anybody?
Is it because the infrastructure, like, it doesn't uh, have the right infrastructure to adopt those?
Um, let's
Like,
be more specific. What do you mean by infrastructure? When
I
you
mean,
say infrastructure, it usually means roads.
yeah, I mean, charging points on the road, because maybe in America it's more populated. Like in Australia, are longer
You could
roads.
be right. I don't
Yeah.
want to say no. I don't want to say no to you because I don't know. I'm not sure. That could be a reason, but I would say it's not the main reason. It's not the
Maybe
main reason.
maybe because there is no Australian electric car company.
Um, Probably not the right reason. I mean, you if you can see, Tesla is already in Australia. They sell Tesla cars. I've seen Tesla cars going around the city, but really not as much as you would see in Los Angeles, for example, or San Francisco.
Yeah.
The rules and the regulations which we have in Australia, the type of a car Tesla is, it's not probably worth it to get something like this when you can't even speed more than 100 k's an hour.
Ah, okay, that's an interesting thought. Yes and no, maybe. Tesla being a sports car, really, it's high performance electric vehicle. But even then, I mean, they have other electric vehicles. There are the Myvec of Mitsubishi. There's the Chevrolet Bolt. I'm not sure they sell that here, but they do sell the Mitsubishi Myvec, and they also sell the Leaf, the Nissan Leaf, I think, here in Australia. Um, anyway, you know the reason is it's because of the high price. And why is it highly priced? Because there's no incentive from the government. Not much anyway. I'm not sure 100%, but I read an article which said that the Australian government, unfortunately, doesn't give us much incentive to electric car manufacturers to be here, and therefore the price is higher than if you would normally check that in the United States. If you buy a Tesla in the United States, you compare that with the price of Tesla here in Australia, you will find that Tesla here is much more expensive because there's no incentive, there's no tax incentives, etc., and therefore Tesla would be forced to have to raise the price. Not to mention that you can imagine they are shipping these Teslas from China or wherever they're built, and they're driven, oh, not driven, but they're sent here. So there's also an added cost there. But the main reason is in lack of incentives from government. Okay, so you can see how strong that influence of putting in some incentives from the government to industry. Okay, pull factors on why people go abroad or why firms go abroad. Again, as I said, competitive pressures. If you were Mercedes-Benz, a luxury automobile, which probably also has electric vehicles now, and you know that the premium market in the United States is quite heavily dominated by Tesla, you would probably ask yourself, there's probably a better place where I will sell my car. Why do I want to compete in the United States? Maybe I'll compete in Australia where there's less competitors. However, more expensive, right? Because of the incentive. So it's a combination of things. Again, here, attractive export development or incentive programs. That's one of the key reasons why a company will want to open operations in another country. So I have a thought about this. If you were doing Dyson, if you're doing Haier or GE, etc., which markets would be interesting to go into? Which markets have export development incentives, etc.? Which markets have strong GDP per capita? And that would be some of the markets you would be looking at. Look, I'm not asking, in your assignment, I'm not asking for a lot of detail with regards to going international. I think that's going to be too much. You're just going to spend too much time analyzing one country after the other. I think it's sufficient for you to look at the developed nations as your main reason or the main targets for selling your car. Okay. Um, Unless perhaps you're Chinese, or not if you're Chinese, but rather your company is Chinese and you might have natural advantages to selling your vehicle in China. You might want to say, well, and there are not that much foreign companies going into China to sell their electric vehicles. That might be an incentive for you to that could be a strategy for you, in other words. Okay, other reasons. Let's go on here. So when you're going international, some of the key questions, are two main questions you want to ask is, where will you locate yourself? Now, there are two, in fact, sub-questions that are related to this is, number one, where will your office be? But number two, where will you manufacture your product? And also, where will you get the components that make up your product? It doesn't necessarily have to come from one place. You can actually source cheaper or better quality materials from other countries and bring them to your place of manufacture. So many global companies like Boeing, they don't just get their parts from the United States. They get their parts from all over the world, including Australia, including, I think, countries like Spain, countries like China. So each component of the airplane could be built in different places and then shipped to Seattle, where they are brought together to create a jumbo jet or a 787 Dreamliner, etc. So where to locate? And by the way, locating yourself in a country you're not familiar with or where you're not yet established presents some cultural issues, of course. And this is what we mean by distance matters. So distance is not just distance in terms of number of miles or kilometers away from your your home country, but also in terms of the cultural distance or the cultural differences. The United States has a particular way of doing business, and they may not do well in countries like China because the Chinese businessmen have a different way of thinking. The Chinese workers have a different way of working. And that could be completely different from, say, from Australia. And if you're a United States company going into Australia, Australia is more similar to the United States in terms of culture, and therefore you may not have as much problems locating yourself in Australia. The second general question would be, how best should you structure the organization? Will you be decentralized, where decision-making is done in each country? Or will you be centralized, where the decisions are made from the home country where you're originally from, and you're making decisions on, let's say, your operations in China, but you're making these decisions from the United States? Now, can somebody comment on that? What's wrong? What are the basic disadvantages if, let's say, you're a US company and you operate a Chinese operation there, maybe a branch of your office, but then you're making these decisions in the United States? What could be the disadvantages to that? Anybody? Anyone? Come on, guys. Help us wake up. Slow afternoon, I'm sure. Give it a go. It'll help you wake up, I swear to you. So Jesse, Hong, Linushan, come on. Even Silesh and Suhel, please feel free to chime in. Amelia. My question, I'll repeat my question so you have a chance. So my question is, if you are a US company and you're operating a branch in China, and you make decisions in the United States about your operations in China, what's the problem with that?
just clarify that operation in terms of you mean distribution or like the whole manufacturing stuff and then do your own distribution in China?
I didn't get that, Hong. Are you clarifying the question, or are you
Yeah,
giving me?
yeah. I was asking like if they do have their own operation in China and then they have their own distribution channel in China as well, or manufacture in America and then transfer to China and distribute it in China?
Oh, whatever it is. My question was more very general. In case, for example, I'll give you more specific example. So I might be Tesla, and I decide I'm going to sell Tesla cars in China. So I set up a Tesla distribution office in China. But then the marketing decisions, I decide to centralize my organization, and the decisions will be made about the marketing of Tesla in China. I'll make the decisions in the United States, and therefore that's a more centralized approach. Now, what could be the problem involved with that?
Time consuming, obviously.
Beg your pardon?
Time consuming.
Who is answering that? Sorry, I'm missing
Sorry,
that. Hong?
Yeah.
Yes. So time consuming to make decisions? You could
Centralized.
argue no. I mean, look at us now. We are holding a class I'm teaching this from my house. You could very well be in India right now or in China, and I could be making decisions, right? The speed is not really an issue.
Oh, one thing is that probably if it's centralized over in America, probably America doesn't know much about the local demands and the
Yes.
actual.
Yeah, you're right. So it's about familiarity with the market. And so having a centralized organization has certain advantages, but also certain disadvantages. The advantage would be centered around control. Uh, you know, you don't make you hopefully anyway, you make less mistakes because you're not second guessing. So what happens is, if you want to make sure the strategy is being followed strictly, then the decisions can be made from the home country. But then again, you're not really familiar with the current situation on the ground. Lot of issues as well. There's not just that, right? Now you could argue that yes, you can make a quick decision, but if you are a centralized organization, what happens is all the decisions are now pushed up and say, I'm not going to make the decision. I'm going to ask my boss that. Now, if your boss has 10 people that report to him and all 10 people are asking him to make a decision, he has 10 decisions to make. You know what I'm saying? 10 decisions to make, which it can take him forever to finish that, to make that decision. Now, however, if I've got 10 people, but then I tell my 10 people, you make the decision yourself, and you only elevate the more important ones, then I'm, as boss, I can only be making decisions on a few things, like maybe 3 to 4 decisions, as opposed to 10 decisions that I'm being asked to do. What I'm saying is, if I'm decentralized, then I can make people make decisions on their own, and the speed is in a way better that way because they don't have to wait for me to make a decision. So in that sense, speed could be an issue. Got it? Yeah, it's pretty clear. Just refreshing your memory. This is not something unusual. I'm sure you've heard about decentralized and centralized structures. Okay, other issues to consider is, although you want to maximize the global aspect of things, and what are the advantages, by the way, of being global? Can somebody tell me? There are a lot of advantages and also disadvantages, but name me a few.
The company will have a larger market for itself.
Very good. Bigger market, potential for profit because you've got a large market. Yeah. How about you, Heshna? Do you have an idea, an advantage of going global?
More opportunities, obviously. Probably like wider understanding of the demand of that particular product.
Oh
Obviously.
yeah, well, I guess you learn more about other markets and how you can possibly improve your product. That's good.
Exactly, and building a
Um,
brand name. Yeah.
yes. The other advantages to going global would be again going back to economies of scale, and I really want to stress that's one of the more important aspects. The more you produce of a product, the better chances of you reducing the cost. And just like any in basic economics, right? You bring down the price of your product, your production will go up, and the more units you're able to sell. And sometimes it's the global aspect that allows you to do that. It also opens the door for you to get to know other suppliers, maybe cheaper suppliers. Once you go global, then you can open up, you don't have to be looking for battery manufacturers only in the United States. But if you are operating in China, then there's more opportunities for you to meet cheaper or better quality suppliers within that country. So that's why people or countries or firms rather want to go global. There's a lot of economies of scale behind that. Um, but then at the same time, although you want to think global, you also want to act local. What does that mean? Think global, act local.
Keep that so for example, like keep that touch from where you started, so that stands out as your brand.
Yes and no. That's one aspect of thinking local. I think what you're saying is don't forget where you came from, that sort of thing. You can argue that IKEA has never forgotten where it's where it came from, right? And they are a Scandinavian firm, and they stress that it's part of their marketing. They're saying we're Scandinavian. We are, what are they? Swedish, I think they're Swedish. So they're saying, oh, we're Swedes, and Swedes are known to be this. And that's part of their marketing, really. It's a part of their positioning as well. But it's more than that. It's more than the saying think global but act local is more than that. Anybody?
Is it more like adaptation to local? Like people have been talking about markets trying to introduce vegetarian option in India. So kind of something
Yes.
like that.
Yes, very good. Oh, you're absolutely right. Although we want to sort of go, open our operations around the world, go into different countries, we have to remember that our culture is not always the best culture for the country we're going into. That doesn't mean that our products are perfect and our products will always be accepted. And I think that's largely true, or especially true for food companies. So the thing about food is that people have different tastes, and although we can all probably agree that a smartphone is a smartphone is a smartphone, but people will have varied opinion about food. I mean, an Australian might like Chinese food, but then another country might not like Chinese food. Yeah, there's just so much variety with regard to food, especially. Okay, so what we're saying is be very careful when you're going to another country. You need to know whether these cultural differences will make your product better or will make your product less marketable and less accepted. So many companies tweak their product to make sure that it is better suited for the environment. if you look at higher, Weidu, are you there, Weidu? Weidu? Weidu is there, but he's not answering me. Yinji Zhang, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so I'll give you a tip. Hire, one of the main advantages of Hire, and I would say one of their key competitive advantages is the fact that they're really good at tailor fitting their product to the market they're in. And they're very agile. They're able to say, okay, this product is suited for China, but it's not suited for France. So when they look at the French situation or the European situation, appliances are usually smaller. So they're able to design their product very quickly to adapt to their market. That's really a huge advantage of Hire. And again, that is a global company that's able to think locally. And they're able to do that because of their structure. They are very team oriented, and they are given a lot of leeway, a lot of discretion to make decisions for their operations within that country. Okay? And yet they're a global company. All right. So they maybe they share a lot of parts, you know, their inner workings of the appliance might be the same, and they are able to maximize economies of scale doing that. They're getting their parts from China, but the outside of the appliance might be designed specifically for that market. Okay, so that's what we mean by acting local. Hofstede, I'm sure you've heard of this guy. He's one of my favorite characters, Gert Hofstede, who passed away, by the way, I think this year he died. One of our famous professors who basically came up with these dimensions of culture. You've heard of these dimensions before, guys, haven't you? Masculinity versus femininity, individualism versus collectivism, uncertainty avoidance. So this is a way to describe each culture. This is a way to compare, let's say, the US culture with the Chinese culture, and then use these dimensions so that you understand how they are different, and also adjust your management style based on these cultural dimensions. It's not just management style, it's also these cultural dimensions will affect the consumer taste and demand for the product. So, example, if you're an electric vehicle, you're trying to market your new product in a country, but in the country they have uncertainty avoidance is very high. That means that they are averse to risk. They don't like to buy new things because they're risky. They're thinking, oh, this new product is unproven, and I don't want to risk buying this product and waste a lot of money. Okay, so there are countries that are very, very risk averse. I'm not sure which one, frankly. There is actually a database of this. You can search that up. Countries that are, I think Latin America, South American countries, they are generally very averse to risk. They have a high uncertainty avoidance. So what that means is it's going to be harder for you to sell your electric vehicle in countries like that. By the way, thinking about the COVID-19 crisis, a vaccine. There's talk about a new vaccine coming up very soon. But the problem is many people are afraid of taking this vaccine. Okay? And this is uncertainty avoidance, right? When people are saying, oh, I don't want to take that vaccine, it's unproven, you know, if I take the vaccine, I might get sick. And some countries, I'm sure, would have a higher rate of people avoiding risk, and therefore refusing to be vaccinated because they are scared of this new vaccine. All right, so I'm not going to go into detail about this. Power distance, by the way, another common dimension. I know that you guys have probably taken this up in other subjects. So if you need more information about this, please do some research about them. They're actually really very interesting dimensions. But again, this affects the way we manage abroad and also the way we market our products. Okay, so we're talking about merging two organizations. This is a very common solution when you want to go abroad, establish operations in another country. You might decide, well, probably the best way to do it is to acquire another company or merge two organizations together. And when you do that, what you're doing is you're integrating your capabilities with another company's capabilities, right? So things to look out for is make sure that there is a synergy when you're buying another company. In fact, are you going to get any advantage when you combine your operating resources together? Is there advantage to having a sales force, combined sales force between your two companies? Are you getting any advantage from the functional skills of the other company that you're purchasing? The R&D capabilities? I'm not sure, but I believe Dyson, when they first started researching solid state batteries, they may have acquired a existing research and development firm was doing research on batteries. Am I right? Am I right? Okay, Anya is nodding her head. Not 100% sure about that. But that's, yes?
Yeah, they did some, they required that, and it was a surprise that you said
Purchase.
yesterday that they gave it up because the solid state battery just was approved to function in cars. So it came as a surprise.
Well, you may have
yesterday.
made a mistake there, right? You never know. But I did read that article, and the article was saying it doesn't mean that they're going to be away from it completely. I guess they're sort of just maybe he's running out of money, and he's worried that it'll take too much time before he can get a return on his investment.
Probably.
So yes, this is what people do. This is what firms do. They go and find other firms that are in that market. Maybe they have some strengths, and then they combine their capabilities. One example of this, by the way, is the Volvo, the car company, has they haven't merged. What they did was they formed a strategic alliance with Uber, and Uber basically has certain advantages. Volvo is already in the car industry, and they're doing a strategic alliance to combine their resources in terms of research and development. So Uber has an advantage in the technical side and in the driverless technology side, perhaps. But then Volvo would supply the vehicles, the actual vehicles, because that's not the core competence of Uber. Okay. So again, combining resources, the functional, the resource, the general management skills, all of this these are the things you need to think about if you are going to acquire a new company. So I'm considering the merger and acquisitions are basically very similar. Okay. A lot of companies use merger because they don't want this impression that they were purchased. When you get purchased, it's almost like an admission that, oh, I lost the game and somebody came and purchased me, purchased my company. So they use merger. It's like the two companies agreed to combine their forces, but in many cases, it's actually a takeover. So integration, how well you integrate will depend a lot on your people, your culture, whether the two cultures get along well together, and whether they actually work. If there's a synergy between these two cultures, and also, of course, the structure, the systems, and procedures. So one of the most famous professors, Peter Drucker, he's a business author. He's argued that if you want your acquisition to be successful, then you have to think of 5 really important things. Number 1 is don't just purchase that other company because you think you can save money by combining, combining the resources together. It should be more than just saving money, or it's also some more than just you're buying that company because the sales of that company is very strong and you want to window dress your company and make your the company bigger than it used to be. So there has to be a synergy. That's what we mean by a strategic contribution when you acquire another company. So is there a chance where your operations, by bringing those operations together, you are actually um, increasing your profits for both companies? There should be a common core of unity. And I think that what this means is your core competencies are similar or are complementary to each other. You believe in the same things, you have similar values, and perhaps you're clearly believe in the same strategies for your company. Thirdly, valued products, services, and customers. When you are acquiring that other company, you should make sure the products that they have are something of value to you and, of course, to customers. Number 4, protect key managers, which means the managers from the other side, make sure you take care of them, because if they leave, that will usually mean more employees will leave, and therefore you might not enjoy the fruits of your acquisition, because people bring with them the expertise, and if these people leave, oftentimes this expertise will disappear with these people who leave, especially if you don't have a good knowledge management system, and all the knowledge resides in the employees, and if this employee leaves, then that's it, your competence disappears as well. So make sure you take care of the managers. Make sure they belong. They feel that they're part of the company, even if they've been acquired. Make them feel that they still have a vibrant culture. They still have something of value to offer the larger company. And 5 is very similar, which is, again, make sure the managers are promoted. Make sure they're rewarded, and there's ability for you to reassign people from one company to the other company. So what happens there is, if you do that, is there are managers from company A going into company B, and there are managers from company B going into company A, and that way you are forcing the 2 cultures to come together and operate as one. Okay, I'm going to show you a really good video that hopefully will give you more ideas about joint ventures and strategic alliances. Give me a moment if I can get that to work.
And takeovers, and look at some examples. That's it. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, nice and short and sweet, but quite informative. Gave us a lot of examples of mergers and joint ventures. So what's the difference again between a joint venture and a strategic alliance? Can somebody tell me? I think we've talked about this a little bit. Anybody? Difference between a strategic alliance and a joint venture.
Strategic alliances is something when 2 companies merge, and joint ventures is something when one of the companies sort of buys up the share of the other company, or sorry.
Sounds like a blender's going on there.
Sorry, I live right next to the train station.
That's all right. Are you still with me? You guys still with me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My screen just went blank. I think there's a bit of a hiccup from the internet. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay. So slightly correct. I think what you said was has a little bit of error there. Strategic alliance is you simply get together with another company and decide, okay, let's share resources here. Let's work together and maybe tackle this new market together because you've got expertise that I don't, and I have expertise that you don't. You know, that sort of thing. But a joint venture means that you're actually putting money into a third party. So, in other words, you and a partner exist separately, but you decide to form a third party, a third company, and you will own this company together, right? So Sony is a separate company. Ericsson is a separate company. They come together. They form Sony Ericsson, a joint venture. Sony still exists on its own, and also Ericsson exists on its own. And they just have a third company that they come together, and their main goal or role is to make mobile phones or smartphones. By the way, that company eventually, Sony took over the shares of Ericsson, and now it's back to Sony. But when they started that company as a joint venture, that was the original intention. Okay, so there's ownership involved, in other words. What you described a while ago, Heshna, was more of a merger or a takeover, a purchase. Okay? Because if there's no third party and you're combining forces, you're one company basically combines with another company to form one company, that is a merger or acquisition.
Okay.
Okay, so a little bit of a difference there. So I think this was discussed a lot, reasons for joint ventures in the video, so I'm not going to go into it. All right, so key issues, the challenges and the success factors when you have a joint venture or a strategic alliance. It's got to be strategic. In other words, you don't combine forces if it's not important. If it's important for one but not important for the other, then that's like a marriage where the wife doesn't love the husband as much as the husband loves the wife, you know, that sort of thing. Unequal love, then the partnership will not turn out well. You know, they say that a joint venture and a strategic alliance is really like a marriage. Strategic alliance is really more like a mutual understanding. Maybe they live together, but they're not married, right? Joint venture is they're really married. They went to church and they got a priest to say, I pronounce you man and wife. And now we're living in the same house. Then that's more like that's a wrong analogy because that's a merger and acquisition when you get married. But a joint venture is like you decide to form another marriage in another country. It's a person with several marriages. Anyway, so make sure there's complementary strategic resources. In other words, you have a competence that the other person or the other firm does not have, and that other person would have competencies that you don't have, right? So in the case of Sony and Ericsson, Sony is actually very good with electronics, but Ericsson had the devices as well, and I think they had expertise in the networks. So that's what they brought into the marriage. What other joint ventures are there with complementary, what do you call this, resources? I think there was mentioned Sky and Comcast came together to combine their resources. So they may be a bit similar, but maybe the content is different from the other company's content. So it's useless to merge and do a joint venture if information is not shared openly. And there has to be genuine integration to create linkages despite divergent cultures. So what happens sometimes is you combine forces, but no real linkages happen. There's no sharing of information. There's no integration, and therefore it's a useless joint venture. Okay. So commitment on both sides, not just on one side. When they combine, hopefully the power that they create is larger and the influence increases. That's another key success factor. Mutual benefits may mean sacrifices on both sides. So you may need to change your culture a little bit, which might be painful for your employees, in order for you to combine and have mutual benefits. Obviously, people have to be flexible. Your organization has to be flexible, especially if priorities change from one company to another. And of course, the cultural differences you have to tackle and make sure you're able to work well within other cultures. Really famous case study is Samsung. Samsung was growing, and their ambition was to come out with these smartphones that could beat Apple. And in many ways they did. They were able to succeed in this quest. But the way they had to do it was to invite people from different cultures to come into their organization. So you can imagine the cultural differences. Koreans are a very particular kind of culture. And if you ask an American or a European to join their organization, and you need that kind of expertise from other nations, but the difficulty would be, how do you get these people to work together, knowing that they have different values? And they were successful, by the way, in doing that, and it's a struggle. It took many years for them to be able to do that. Okay, so I'm sure you've seen something similar, this stage model framework of what a company usually does when they want to go and establish themselves in another country or in several countries. Stage one, of course, is you're completely domestic. You're only doing business in your home country. But then stage two is when you start thinking about, okay, I want to expand my business into, say, Japan, because I can see there's a market for my products in Japan. And I might just decide, well, I'll continue to manufacture in my home country, but I will export my products into Japan. And in many cases, you don't really establish a separate company there. You might just simply sell your products to a distributor who buys your products and sells them in Japan or in another country. So that's the stage two, which is a very shallow kind of engagement. And all that is just export. By the way, can I have a bit of show of hands here? How many of you have taken international marketing or international business? No one?
I have done international business, I think, in
Yes.
my first year.
Right. So international business would have been done by Milan, remember?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is very similar. It might look, the figures might be different, but these are similar things that we discuss when an organization wants to go abroad. There are stages to that. Stage three would be to establish a subsidiary. So your business is doing better while you're exporting, and you decide, well, why do I need to sell my products to a distributor? I can establish a distributor network in that country, and that can be co-owned as a joint venture, or it could be wholly owned by my company. That's stage three. And then finally, stage four is you're not just exporting anymore, but you've actually established a manufacturing facility within that country, and you're making the product from that country. I think there are even higher stages here in terms of engagement, where you have multiple manufacturing facilities focusing on different parts of a particular product. And then you're bringing those parts from all over the world and bringing together in different sites. That's what I was describing a while ago. Boeing does that, where they have their parts made from different countries and they're brought back into Seattle in the United States to be brought together to make an airplane. Okay, other options in going abroad. These are options that are less engaging. You don't have to put too much money into them. In fact, licensing is a really good option where you license the product to be made in another country. Instead of you making the product, a separate company is making it for you, but you give them the technology and the recipes and the process on how to make your product. And then if it's good enough, you allow them to use your brand name, and that is licensing. So franchising is actually a form of licensing. So if you are franchisee for Subway, that is you're under license from Subway United States to make Subway products under their brand name, but you're actually making it yourself. You're just using the expertise and the marketing of the Subway network, and you're also buying the raw materials coming from the Subway parent company, and you are producing your sandwiches in these stores by yourself, right? With the assistance from the licensor. You're the licensee. Okay. So that's licensing. There are also what we call second sourcing agreements or customer supplier relationships. I think the best example of this would be Apple. So Apple iPhone, designed in California, but not made in the US. It is made in China. So the design is shared with a company called Foxconn, a Taiwanese or Chinese company, I believe, operating in China. And they're the main manufacturer of iPhones in the world, I believe, under license and of course under this customer supplier relationship with Apple. So in many cases, you really don't need to do your own manufacturing, right? So you could be Dyson and you've got a brilliant design for an electric vehicle. You have the technology for solid state batteries. Do you need to establish a manufacturing facility? Or can you do a joint venture or a strategic alliance with a company in China already producing batteries, share with them your technology, and away you go. You don't have to invest in a factory because your joint venture partner already has done that for you. So that could be an opportunity as well. Joint R&D, example that I have here would be Subaru and Toyota. Toyota owns about 20% of Subaru, and they decided to collaborate and come up with a vehicle called the 86. I think if you are a car aficionado, you're familiar with the 86. That is a sports car by Toyota, but that's actually co-developed by Subaru. And therefore, Subaru is a very similar car to that car. I can probably show that to you now. What is it? Toyota 86 and Subaru BRZ. There you go. So let's see some images. Very, very similar looking cars. You can see that. Some differences a little bit in features maybe. I'm not sure exactly, but they're co-developed together. The engineers from Subaru and the engineers from Toyota came together and designed this sports car. It's quite popular. You see that around here in Australia. Where were we? Okay, last slide. The other examples of joint ventures, which we talked about here, is Uber and Volvo. So Uber has expertise and also has resources, right? It's got money, a lot of investors. It has a network of Uber drivers. Maybe one day these Uber drivers, instead of bringing in their own car, will be driving a vehicle that's provided to them by Uber and provided by Volvo and Uber. Right? So Uber's got the technical, the software, perhaps technology, while Volvo would have the technology to make the car itself. And you bring those two competencies together, and you have a stronger joint venture. You have a stronger entity. So who's doing Uber? I think one of the companies is doing Uber here. Can Uber go and do their own electric vehicle? Yeah, so that's a question for you. Can Uber do their own? Does it make sense for them to do their own? Or maybe it is not necessarily to make an electric vehicle, but maybe simply to provide certain systems to make an electric vehicle. So they can tighten the strategic alliance or joint venture that they have with Volvo. Let Volvo manufacture it, but they provide certain technology and Volvo pays them for that technology. That could be an opportunity for Uber as well. Okay. Okay, that's it for our international strategy lecture. And at this point,